And Jen, we're about to go live.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. The town hall will begin shortly. Commissioner Locheman, can you please welcome our Spanish-speaking participants and let them know how to access the Spanish audio channel for this meeting?
Buenas tardes, buenas noches a nuestros vecinos aquí del condado de Boulder. Gracias por participar con nosotros en el teléfono virtual de la mesa directiva de los comisionados del condado de Boulder. Hoy es el 8 de julio del 2021. Para participar en español pueden seleccionar su idioma de preferencia haciendo clic en el icono de globo interpretación. Vamos a empezar y comenzar el evento en un par de minutos.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones, can you please read our land acknowledgement?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. I acknowledge that I live on land within the territories of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples. I acknowledge the institution I represent was founded on the erasure and attempted erasure and exclusion and attempted erasure of indigenous peoples and cultures. I acknowledge that the American Indian community of Boulder County today, the elders past and present, and future generations.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Churchill, Public Affairs Specialist with the Commissioner's Office. We are so happy to have you join us tonight for our County Commissioners Town Hall. Today, the Commissioners will moderate a conversation with our subject matter experts on what the county is doing to manage all of the additional visitation to our parks and open space, as well as what our land managers would like to see from visitors. After that, I will ask questions related to parks and open space that have been submitted by residents. Then we will answer submitted questions live via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and revisit a few poll questions from our last meeting, which can also be answered if you are participating via Zoom. Joining us today for our initial conversation with the commissioners are Jeff Moline, Acting Co-Director for Parks and Open Space, Bevan Carithers, Resource Protection Supervisor, and Randy Wilbur, Special Operations Commander, overseeing the park deputies, wildland fire crew, Gross Reservoir Rangers, and liaison with the mountain deputies. Welcome, everyone. Before we get started, however, we have had lots of interest in the hiring of the new BCPOS director. The chair of the board will give us a brief update.
Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks everybody for showing up for our July town hall meeting. We've had a couple of these already and we'll continue to have them. But we've got a lot of questions about the hiring of the new Parks and Open Space Director. And so since we're talking about visitation to that area and other area lands in the county, we thought it'd be great to bring you up to speed. We've done a lot of work to do this right. In April, we did a lot of background work, job description, that kind of thing. In May, we did a nationwide search using a third-party contractor, and it resulted in 60 applicants. In June, the position was closed and the candidates were filtered by minimum qualifications. We did that by reviewing the county commissioners and the county administrator using a selection matrix, a scoring matrix, if you will, that removed personally identifying info. So we didn't have anything going on around that. And then the semifinalists were selected in July this month. In fact, today, the 5 semifinalists were interviewed by a public panel and a staff panel. Sorry, I just got my security thing that makes me log back in. That happened today, and what'll happen from that, they'll select 2 or 3 finalists, and that will be made public, who those people are at that point. And for you, if you wanted to participate in that, you can do that in an in-person presentation on July 23rd at the Beach Shelter at 1 p.m. We do ask you to register for that in-person event. You can send your email to posinfo@bouldercounty.org. We'll put that out there so you can find it on the Zoom call. Candidates, the presentations will also be made available for viewing online on the Boulder County Parks and Open Space website throughout the weekend, through the weekend of July 23rd. And we welcome your comments on those presentations, and we'll use that in our consideration in August when the commissioners and the county administrator will make a final decision who is selected as director. And we'll announce that decision at that time. So it's a thorough process, nationwide process. We know how important this department is to the people of the county and actually the state and the country. It's a great program. So we use that kind of effort to make that happen.
Thank you. Now let's get to the conversation. Commissioner Jones, I believe you're starting us off.
Yes, I am. So to the panelists, can each of you talk about the increase in visitation seen in 2020? What are you seeing this year? Everybody knows that we had a pandemic and people got out more. We're going to give you more specificity. It's really become an issue for the county, and we wanted to explain that and have people understand.
Thanks, Commissioner Jones. I'm going to start off. So my name is Jeff Moline. I'm one of the interim co-directors for our department while we wait for a new director. And as some of you know, 2020 was a record year for visitation at Boulder County Parks and Open Space. We had 2.1 million visits over all of our system for the whole year. And that in that 1 year, that was a 44% increase over the numbers that we saw in 2019, which were also already a high number of visits. Now, as we start looking at 2021, this year is looking a little bit more like a pre-pandemic year. And overall, our most recent tallies for May, the numbers were down as much as 80% for some of our parks, such as Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm. But typically the numbers that we're seeing in 2021 are either at the 2019 or above the 2019 levels. And in fact, generally what we're seeing across our whole system thus far is a 41% increase over 2019. So while last year was, record numbers, this year we're starting out not seeing quite those record numbers, but numbers that are represent an increase over what we had been seeing in 2019. So with that, those are some updates on those visitation numbers for 2020 and 2021. And I'm not sure if Bevan or Randy would like to comment on anything additional or not.
I will. So I'm Commander Randy Wilbur. I'm in charge. One of the sections I'm in charge of is the Parks and Open Space Deputies on the Sheriff's Office side. And kind of just to reflect what Jeff just said, the numbers this year are a little bit lower, but they're still much higher than we would have anticipated from 2019. And then the other thing we're seeing on our side is just the spread. There's a lot more people going to a lot of different places. And then some of those areas that aren't normally heavily used for open space purposes are being used. So that's one of the things we're seeing on our side.
Wow, 2.1 million visitors and visits. That's amazing. Thank you, panelists, for joining us this evening and for being here. And thanks to our community members for participating and being interested as well to learn more about what's happening in the Commissioner's office in general. So I have a question for y'all, panelists. What environmental impacts did we see to land or impacts to the user experience from the increase in visitation?
Thanks, Commissioner Luchman. I'll start answering, and then maybe Randy and Bevan can chime in. So one of the things that we've seen with the high numbers in 2020 was just really heavy use of trailheads. And so one of the things that translates into is repairs that we have to make and maintenance that we have to make at our parking lots. And so, for example, additional potholes, just because there's more use. We oftentimes get people bumping into some of our curb stops and fences. And so that's just one of the impacts. The trails generally haven't seen super extensive problems with overuse. That often comes with more intense rainstorms. We also have a program where when our trails are at risk of when they're muddy and we have a risk of people stepping off the trail and damaging areas alongside the trails, we'll often do closures, and we've continued to do that. Nevertheless, we do see with these added numbers, we have seen a little bit of increase in impacts off of the trail. And then I'm just gonna provide some numbers. Again, some of our most visited and loved places like Carolyn Holmberg Reserve at Rock Creek Farm, visitation doubled from 2019 to 2020. At other popular Plains properties such as Pella and Walden, we saw visitation increase, again, 50% in those locations. And then because Annie White had such a significant repair process for the damage that occurred during the 2013 floods, we really just opened that property again in 2020, and it has a much larger parking lot. And so that was one location where we saw some incredible increases in use, partly because we increased the capacity. And then the last thing I would maybe just say is, typically one of the things that we hear from visitors is they are challenged by accessing and the parking challenges of getting to our properties. But once people get on our trails and at least move away from sort of that front country area, generally we have visitors that are still pretty happy with their experiences on our trails here at Boulder County. They're able to get further into the properties, and the overcrowding doesn't overwhelm their experience.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll chime in. It's Commander Wilbur again. So some of the things we saw were obviously, and Jeff mentioned it, parking around the trailheads and the safety issues caused by that, having access issues with emergency vehicles to get into some of these areas, and then the disruption with the neighborhoods and stuff like that. So definitely the parking lots were filling up, and then the parking was spilling out into the roadways, and at times causing some issues with pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic and vehicle traffic. So we saw some of that. And then the other thing that kind of comes along with some of these higher numbers too is just the number of people that are coming to these areas that haven't been to some of these hiking areas and not sure what to expect and aren't necessarily bringing the proper equipment or prepared for it. And then also with the higher numbers on these flat trails, we call them the lower trails, it starts to inhibit some of the enjoyment of it. So we see these people going higher in elevation, but again, to some of these more secluded, more remote areas to go recreate in, which then starts to impact those areas that weren't used to having an impact in them. And then also spreading out the enforcement abilities and those kinds of things into these areas that we don't normally have to pay a whole lot of attention to.
Thank you, Commander.
Claire, I think you have our next question.
We're not hearing you yet.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I needed to wait to be highlighted. Okay. Third town hall, you'd think I'd have it by now. And I also want to just thank everybody for joining us, our experts as well as the public who's joined us here on this topic. And it's something that I've been excited to answer questions on and present information to the public on, because I know that our open spaces are so well loved, and concern about how we're caring for our land is something that people ask me about all the time. And I think one thing we'll hear as a recurring theme here this evening is that this is really a cross-jurisdictional issue. Open space users don't just come from Boulder County, they come from all over the metro area, and our open space lands are adjacent to to U.S. Forest Service lands. And so we have to really be collaborative in our response. And so to that point, I guess I would like our experts to share how land managers responded to some of those increases in visitor use that you outlined, the issues around parking and rescues and things like that. So how did you respond to that? And Jeff, maybe start again with
Sure.
our Parks and Open Space response.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Commissioner Levy. I am going to just briefly start here and say one of the steps that we took is as a county, as an organization, we realized that we're not in it alone and that we needed to partner with some of the other public land management agencies in the county, including the Forest Service, and then some of the municipalities with their extensive open space programs. So City of Longmont, City of Boulder, Denver Water as well, because of their properties in the county. And so one of the things we've been doing is working comprehensively with all the land management agencies, making sure that we're not taking measures in one area that's going to then cause a problem or an overcrowding in another particular area, but try and work together as a group of partner agencies in the county. And again, Bevan and Randy have been more involved in those discussions, and I think they can maybe provide a little bit more information about some of the detailed work that we're doing there. One thing that we have, one thing I'll just quickly mention is we've been working with all of those agencies on a Know Before You Go campaign, and you can find out more about that on the county's website and probably on the websites of other land management agencies. And just it's that notion of making sure that you have a really good plan and have an understanding and an expectation of when you're going to need to arrive at a place in order to find parking, what to do, have a backup plan if you don't find parking at your first choice of reaching a particular site in Boulder County. What's going to be your alternate, your plan B, because probably parking somewhere along the road might not be an option for you. You might need to go to a different location. So, that's just one example of a campaign that we've done as jointly as a group of land managers in the county. And so now maybe Randy and then maybe Bevan can talk about parking and shelter, or excuse me, and shuttles. So I think Randy's next.
Yeah, so some of the things we did starting this year was we looked at some of the parking issues around the trailheads. We came up with a comprehensive county parking enforcement and parking rules and regulations. Try to make sure that the trailhead entrances are free of cars so that people can get in and out without having accidents and those kinds of things. And emergency services and first responders can respond into some of these areas. So that was one of the things we did. We started doing some what we call parking lot ambassadors. So we started those, some up at Ghost Reservoir and a couple of other places. And really their role was to tell visitors, the parking lot's full and there's some other areas and options maybe to go to. So we started doing some of that. We also had in place, prior to some of this, the HESI 4th of July area shuttle that picked people up at the high school and shuttle them up there. And so we as a county adopted some of that and put it down at Eldorado Canyon State Park down in front of there to try to help alleviate some of those issues down there as well. Just to give people an idea, I have some just quick stats on what that looked like, a little bit on the controversial side. I know some of the neighbors were wondering about that. But from May of 2021 to June, up at the Hesse, we turned around 2,600 some cars. So in that time frame, that's 2,600 people that we kept from going up to the parking lots where there wasn't any parking. We turned around and either got them onto the shuttles or had them go to another recreational area. And then down at El Dorado Canyon State Park, that's only been in place for a very short time, but from June 5th of this year to June 27th, we've already turned around 794 cars down there. So that's hopefully helped alleviate some of those unneeded traffic to go to these areas that the parking lots are full. And so those are some of those temporary solutions, some of those quick fixes that we needed to get in place to try to get some of that stuff taken care of. We've also had discussions around. I'm sure some people are aware of some of the reservation systems that have gone in, like up at Brandon Lake and stuff like that. So there's been discussions around that, and those are ongoing discussions. I know for myself and Bevan will talk here in a minute, and Bevan, there's things that have to happen, and we're just trying to figure out what's going to work and help us in this stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks, Randy. I'm Bevan Withers, and I supervise the county rangers. Just kind of building off what Jeff and Randy both said, I think one of the most exciting things about some of the outcomes we had and the silver lining from 2020 was just really how collaborative all the land management agencies in the county had to become. So before 2020, we all had our own jurisdictions. We tended to work within those jurisdictions. And now we're collaborating almost every week. Different rangers are working with different ranger groups. The deputies are an integral part of how we manage recreation. For example, we have county rangers assisting up at Gross Reservoir. We have city rangers that are helping county rangers up on Flagstaff. So we're seeing a real coordination of land management and search and rescue agencies in this county that we've really never seen before. I think a lot of that started with the Hesse shuttle, where the city of Boulder, the county, Public Works, Parks and Open Space really all had to come together to look at that issue up there. And we've really provided a service, I think, to the county that shows we can work together, that we have multi-jurisdictions, that we can overlap with one another and really have the best outcomes. So I really agree with Randy. We've had a great success up at Hesse, almost to the point that we probably need to take it to the next step. Is that a reservation system? Is that something we haven't even thought of yet? But I really think kind of those future looking ideas are what's going to keep us having these trailheads and trails open to everyone in the county and even outside of the county.
So I'd like to thanks for those answers. I know that particularly because the El Dorado shuttle is new, that we're still getting a handle on what the potential of that shuttle is, and the number of cars that you've turned away just is an indication of how popular these areas are. The one thing I wanted to note here regarding El Dorado Springs is that our project manager actually had to drive the shuttle himself because of staff shortages. And I think everybody is seeing labor shortages, and this is how it shows up for us. We can't run it as frequently as we'd like to, but the ridership is already double what we saw in 2020 with a little over 200 boardings per day. So those are 200 cars maybe plus or minus that did not go down El Dorado Springs Drive. And I know that that's a sore point for the neighbors, and we're still learning how to manage the visitor overuse in that area. So I think Matt has the next question, and I'll relay the spotlight over to him.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, that's really interesting, the statistics and the numbers. One other point that I saw here is that the Hesse takeaway from 2018 to last year was 2 times as high, the visitation and on the shuttles. So it's working and helping up there. And thanks to the sheriff's office for doing all the work up there too. It's been a lot of overtime for people, a lot of cost to the county that we needed to step up and help with. But you know, I think you've probably seen in the newspapers or on TV the pressure that search and rescue groups have with all this increased visitation. And we're lucky to have Rocky Mountain Rescue here helping us. But what people don't realize is those groups are volunteer. And you can imagine having a day job and then having your calls go up and what that might mean to your personal and family life. But people keep doing it. And I'm always amazed that we have such generous and fit, quite frankly, people to do this work if you've ever seen them operate. So, so we heard the numbers have gone up. Randy, is that the case?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Jones. Yes, they have gone up. And I just have some very generic stats in front of me, but 2019, we were in the area of 198 rescues. 2020, that jumped up to 256. And right now, we're sitting 91 rescues for the year. And, I will tell you, there's a couple of nuances to those numbers that might help explain some things. So in the past, we might have a rescue going on at a time, maybe 2 rescues at most going on at a time. We this year have seen in multiple rescues going on at the same time. So you'll have 2 or 3 rescues going on at the same time using these volunteers. So that's been a huge increase for us. These are numbers that we're not used to, and we're trying to make some adjustments to on our end. And also to your point, they are volunteers. And I think sometimes it's easy to say, well, this is volunteers, it's not costing the county money, but there's money involved in these rescues. And I don't have those stats in front of me, but rescues aren't free. Someone's paying for those. And so, you know, what we want to make sure is, again, trying to make sure we get the message out as best as we can, that people are prepared, that they have water, that they have the proper hiking equipment, that they understand that the trails are on, and the time frame it's going to take if they want to go on this trail to a certain location. That you start at 3 in the afternoon, you're going to be out there in dark. So that means you either need to prepare for that or understand that, start your hikes earlier. So just trying to get some of that education out there for some of that.
Randy, I'd just like to add too, when you speak about the nuance with search and rescue, oftentimes we're just looking at the numbers from our professional volunteer organizations and those big rescues that make it into the media. But just in 2020, the county rangers alone participated in just over 500 calls for service, and those tend to be things like just broken ankles or maybe a broken hand or somebody that's lost not too far from the trailhead. And I just think it's important to note that, you know, all the different ranger groups in the sheriff's office are handling these smaller search and rescues or emergency operations all the time, and that you know, it helps when visitors are also preparing before they go out for those smaller incidents as well.
And I'll just tag on to you, Bevan, just real quick. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something I overlooked. Is you know, the other aspect of some of these search and rescues is, again, people are going higher into the altitudes and elevations and into these really remote areas to try to get some space from other people, which then really starts to extend the amount of time and person power and you know, air assets and those kinds of things that we end up having to use on some of these rescues. So really kind of driving some of that up.
Thank you. We've actually received some parks and open space questions directly from residents as well. I will ask these, and whomever wishes to answer, please just jump in. Virginia asks, given that we are loving our open space to death, especially as we reap mental health benefits during the pandemic, can some of the COVID money from the feds be used to hire people to maintain and improve the trails we love so much?
Oh, go ahead. Subject matter expert, please.
No, I would just say that at least for us in parks, we've looked at utilizing both CARES, the first set of funding, and the second, the ARPA funding, and we've generally decided that we're better off and better suited to using our existing funding and staff structure to kind of do our maintenance work. But we're always looking for ways to improve and focus on the maintenance of existing structures and trails, and while we're balancing other new initiatives we have in the department. So we're certainly open to looking at alternate funding sources, but at this point for our department, we felt it was we were better served by just working within our own budgetary guidelines, which do provide us a good funding for working on the maintenance of these facilities.
Great. And I was just going to add on to that, this year already, in less than 6 months, the commissioners have approved some additional rangers to be out and doing this work that our experts have been talking about. And part of that is allowing then folks who are already with Parks and Open Space to do the maintenance when we have other folks helping divert traffic. And we have other folks who are helping us close down trails if needed so that folks aren't outside of the trails and doing damage to wildlife and our ecological systems, et cetera. So it's all connected. And we're trying to, we're letting our department heads and our interim directors and staff who know the land really guide the work so that we can get that all done.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Hey, Jennifer, can I jump in on that one real quick? And just what the sheriff has told us, Sheriff Pelley, that last year we spent, I think it was $100,000 in overtime addressing this issue. That's a lot of money. I do believe that was CARES Act qualified and paid for last year. But the other side of that coin is, we're asking people to do overtime, and they have lives, and that will only go on so long. It's not a sustainable system for the long term if the visitation increases. So we're going to have to address that issue as well.
Jennifer, I'd just like to mention too that during all of this, and especially over the last 6 months or so, volunteers from the community and from our Parks and Open Space programs and some of our seasonal staff that were available to work overtime have really been tremendously helpful with us out on the trails. So our volunteer park patrollers and our community groups that are helping us rebuild some of the trails after all the rains. I think sometimes we overlook the contribution that they make to our programs. And I think especially during COVID, it was scary. It was scary for some rangers. And we had volunteers get out there, put on their masks, and out there assisting us as well, helping direct people to different trailheads. And so the community really needs a big thank you for all the volunteer hours that they've contributed as well.
Thank you, Bevan. Thanks, everyone. If it's okay, I'm going to jump out of my pre-set up questions that were emailed so I can answer, we can try to answer a question that came in live so that we're not neglecting our attendees. Neil has asked, would Boulder County consider a reservation system like the National Park Service to avoid overuse in future? Randy, I think you might want to tackle that.
So, yeah, so that's probably one of the open space, Jeff or Bevan maybe.
Or I can, I'll take a stab at starting that and then probably pass the baton to an expert. And just, this is something I think, when Rocky Mountain National Park went to that, their system really got overloaded pretty quickly because there was so much demand, and it takes a lot to stand something like that up. And I think they learned a lot through their first year on how to do that correctly. But it's, I think we are unfortunately going to have to move in that direction. I think the challenge, and maybe Jeff can speak to this, is that you can do that when you have sort of a single point of entry, and maybe that works at Hall and Heil where there's one access point and you can meter it, but it does take staff to monitor and stand that up. And I think both Jeff and maybe it was just Jeff that mentioned this earlier, once you get out of the parking lot, it's okay. And so I would be really reluctant to limit access if we can't, unless we can't solve the parking access issue in some way. So I know there are really complicated operational issues associated with this, but we all want to get out. And we can do a lot more to direct people to other open spaces that areas that don't have as much pressure. I've been to Rabbit Mountain several times and found plenty of parking spaces, but don't tell anybody. And if you go, like I've been to Ann-U White at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's plenty of parking, but again, that's just between us. So, you know, we need to think about other strategies here as well. But Jeff, what would you like to add?
You know, you really covered it well, Commissioner Levy. I don't really have anything more to add other than that, and maybe I'd let Bevan talk specifics if he'd like to. We're not staffed or and we don't have the infrastructure that some of the national parks have with, as you alluded to, you know, with entrance station that really allow you to institute and enforce kind of a reservation system. We're just, you know, at this point, our system just isn't built to work that way. So, you know, if things really continue to be really crowded in some particular areas, maybe at some point we could look at, you know, some other options, but we're really not built to do it that way now. And as, again, generally our user surveys show that once people are able to successfully get to and navigate to the trailhead, and once they get out on the trails, at that point we really see mostly satisfied people who are happy with the levels of crowding on the trail. So I don't know, Bevan, did I just pretty much say everything you might have said? I'm sorry.
No, Jeff, that's great. Commissioner Levy, I think you have just the perfect synopsis of what's difficult for us with reservation systems. That single point of entry and those staff that can welcome people to the park and check a reservation. We just don't have that infrastructure. Staff has just barely started having some brainstorming around the possibility of some type of reservation system with the shuttle up at Hesse. And as you can imagine, that has very limited parking. It does have one point of entry. So maybe that's a place that we can experiment a little bit, some type of reservation system, but those are in the very preliminary discussion mode.
Thanks.
Thank you all. That was really helpful. I'm going to go back to a question that came in, and I'm sure some of you have heard this in the past. Diane asks, I would like for you to study charging a realistic admission fee to park and open space users that do not live in Boulder County and would like the county's municipalities to do the same. Boulder County taxpayers and Boulder City taxpayers are subsidizing free recreation for the metro area, and that needs to stop. Who would like to address that?
I'm happy to start, and then if any staff or commissioners would like to chime in, that would be very welcome. We've looked at this concept a number of times, and of course, as people might be aware, some of our adjacent peer agencies do actually do this. For example, City of Boulder, Open Space and Mountain Parks charge parking fees for out of county visits. I think out of county visitors at some of their parking areas. But again, as sort of what we talked about in the previous question, even this sort of a fee-based entrance system is going to also require some added staff. Also, it's going to involve hiring rangers to do a different set of duties than they normally are used to, and then their normal education outreach. Bevan might want to comment on that a little bit additionally as well. And then I was just going to mention that additionally, our program has a long tradition of being free to visitors. And since we utilize sales tax fees that are levied, of course, on both residents and people who visit our county, we've always had this element of equity and inclusion to having our properties be available without fees. So we sort of have this tradition of that. So that's kind of an explanation for where we're at. But I do hear the the comment that we do have many people from out of the county visiting and utilizing our parks. And I don't know if Bevan would like to add anything at this point or not, or Randy.
I would like to add something.
Or yes.
No, that's fine. Just on your last comment about the barrier that a fee would create.
Yeah.
And if the purpose of the fee is to recover costs, I think that would not really be how we want to do that. We do have a dedicated sales tax, and the voters have been very generous in extending that sales tax. And I think fees are just generally not a good way to limit use, because it does create a barrier to people. And we want people that have lower incomes to be able to use them, people with large families that may enjoy recreating on our open space. So I think it's, I just think it's not something that would really solve the overuse problem. And we have other ways to fund the needs of the program.
I'd just add, I think too, talking with a lot of people, similar professionals to myself, we often hear that the fees just don't even cover the amount that it takes for rangers to go and collect them. So when it comes down to it, you're charging fees for somebody to collect those, and it really doesn't have much to do with the recovery of trails or rangers or the rescues. The other thing that we hear so frequently on our trails is just thanks from visitors that don't live in Boulder County of how much they appreciate the trails, that they can drive from a different community and they're open to them. We often think it's folks coming from Denver, but we interact with folks from Northern Colorado and Weld County, and folks coming just this weekend. A lot of folks were coming over from the mountain communities and spending time in Boulder County. So I think that's something that's kind of special about our trails. And I would hate to see people not feeling welcome to come visit when they're here.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, we do have another question that came in that I think is an interesting one. Is there a plan to institute cross-the-board bilingual signage and other information in the parks?
Yes, there is. Bevan, are you more closely associated with this than I am, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm part of a group right now that's looking at developing our really language inclusive signage that doesn't depend on any language. So what we're really looking right now is the utilization of different icons and international symbols. So no matter which language you speak, when you visit our parks, you may see somebody, one of those square icons with the red slash or one without the red slash, and you immediately know what that means. And we're really looking at right now hiring someone to complete a contract that could look at all the international symbols and provide us with guidelines of best practices on how to implement that in the parks. On those signs where we know we need language, we are going to start with Spanish first. So as we roll out these new language inclusive signs, those that have some kind of warning or caution, those will also be in English and Spanish. And I think I just saw just a day ago, a huge delivery come with all of our new welcome panels. So when you visit a kiosk into one of our parks, the first thing that we had translated was the welcome to Boulder County Parks and Open Space. And those will start hitting the trails anytime now. So when you visit a park, you'll see that welcome in both English and Spanish. And we're really proud of the way those look and what they say and how they're welcoming two different language speakers into our parks.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go back to a question from Riley, which was sent in before the meeting. All of Boulder County's public lands were stolen from Indigenous people in violation of treaty. Why not return ownership and stewardship of this land to Native tribes?
I'm happy to start on this one. This is a really important topic for us. I think one thing that I would just note as a distinction for us from county versus federal lands is that for us, our taxpayer-funded sales and property taxes allowed our organization to purchase lands from willing private sellers during the last 46 years of our program. And so that's I think an important distinction when you compare that to some of the federal lands, organizations and agencies. However, I would also just say, and we've talked about this a little bit with some of the other questions, that our department has completed a cultural responsiveness and inclusiveness strategic plan. And it directs our department to take measures to ensure that people from Indigenous, Black, and Latinx communities are included in the creation of plans and partnerships for our properties, and in ways that address the interest of the full spectrum of all kinds of people. And so we're also partnering with other local agencies to provide a forum to hear the comments, requests, and ideas from these local communities, and to look for ways to co-create and implement those. And Bevan actually mentioned one of the things that we're doing with as it relates to signage. So we are making some efforts on this great question. And I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thanks for starting that off for us, Jeff. I mean, there's a couple pieces in that question, and it's a big one because it's not just open space lands, it's just lands all around this country, and certainly other areas of Boulder County as well, not just our open space or quote unquote public lands. And so I do want to just share with participants who are watching now or later that I've been very encouraged by our open space department and the work that's being done with our staff, directors, current interim directors on the CRISP plan that was just discussed, as that's coming into development and will be implemented with our new director, as well as some of the work. A presentation was brought to the commissioners maybe 8 weeks ago now, in conjunction with several different departments, really looking at the history in Boulder County. And we have opportunities all over Boulder County to truly understand that question. So I appreciate Riley's question. And I also want to make sure that we are really asking that question everywhere. And so how do we continue collaboration? But I think it's important to hold us all accountable to what is our piece in that work. If we talk about specifically Native Americans and American Indians and those different pieces here, and what else can we be doing in different areas. So I don't know if anybody else had anything they wanted to add on there or not, but it's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to go to a question that came in on the Q&A from Joshua. He is not liking the Dowdy Draw checkpoint, and he would like to know what you're doing to promote a shuttle. He doesn't think it's working, the Dowdy Draw checkpoint. I know that was put in to help limit traffic going into our El Dorado Canyon State Park. Randy, is that one you want to take a stab at?
Sure, I would be glad to. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks.
So let me just start by saying that is an area that has multiple stakeholders down there. So really you have the residents that live down in that area. You have the artesian water, I can't think of the name of it, but the pool. Then you have Colorado State Parks for the El Dorado Canyon area. And then you also have city open space. So this is one of those areas where Bevan mentioned it. We're trying to really work collaboratively with everybody down there to try to come up with a good solution. The parking down there when COVID hit was out of control. Everyone said, well, can we just not have people park down here? And my response is I can't keep people from coming. And if we don't have areas for them to park, they're going to park in the neighborhoods, which is what they've been doing. So one of the things we did was put the checkpoint into place to run it as a test run for this year. It was only a test run to see how that was going to play out and how that was going to work. One of the concerns that came up was the placement where that checkpoint is at. In problem with that area down there is just the logistics of where you can have a checkpoint and have cars being turned around safely without causing accidents or more problems. So that was where it got put. It's something that we looked at to see about moving it. At this point, it's not something we can move. But just having, going back to what Bevan was saying, the conversations with the Colorado State Parks was that, maybe they need to look at a reservation system for the state park itself to try to limit the amount of people driving up into the state park to get turned around at the state park and then drive back down through town, drive back through there. So one of the things, I'm sorry, my light just turned off. I thought the power went out, but my light just turned off. But one of the problems we have down there is every time a car drives up and it gets turned around at the state park, then they're having to come back down through town, which then starts impeding the flow of the shuttle buses. So that's the piece I could talk about right there. As far as promoting the shuttle down there, I know it's kind of a new shuttle down there. I think they started it last year, and they're increasing the messaging around that. One of the things they did this year was try to put up a tent or a location people knew where the shuttle was picking up there at 93 and El Dorado Canyon on the east side over there, so that people knew where the checkpoint was at, the pickup was at. And then the people that run in the checkpoints are handing out flyers and telling people where to go get the shuttle so they can park the car and ride the shuttle. So we knew and understood there was going to be some issues come up with that. Trying to address those as quickly as we can and figure out a different solution to some of those problems. So I hope that answered the question.
Hey, Jen, I would just add in to Joshua, like, one thing that we've noticed as rangers is that changing recreational behavior is so difficult. When people get in their cars and they have a place where they want to go,
Yeah.
it is so hard to change their minds. And we all know that from ski traffic, from everything that we do here in Colorado. And one thing that I'd just say to Joshua is we really didn't start seeing, tremendous impacts from the Hesse shuttle up at the town of Eldora for several years. But now, I think if you talk to anyone from the town of Eldora, they would say things are 100% better, that we've really gotten that under control, that public emergency services can get in and out of there easily. They can get there easily. They can enjoy their weekends again without hundreds and hundreds of cars driving by their homes. So just to Joshua, give us a chance. It'll take a little bit of time to change those behaviors. But I think from the Hesse shuttle, we've seen that people are willing to do it. It just takes a little time to catch on.
So I would jump in there. Randy, thanks for being on here. I know you have to leave early. I'm glad you had a chance to answer that particular question. The other thing you should know is that this shuttle program that started last year is funded solely by the county. It is a state park on a state road, and going by city trailheads, and the county stepped up. So that, I think, is a sign about how much we're working on this issue. The second thing is, and this is really interesting, our staff was pretty innovative this year. They looked at the visitor study in the state park, and it's obvious a lot of people aren't from Boulder or even Boulder County there, and the numbers back that up. So what they did is they worked with RTD to get access to the McCaslin Park and Ride over in Superior, which is a big lot, so people could get the shuttle from there. And because if you're driving from Denver and you know that you've been turned around once, but you know there's a good option for getting on a shuttle at that park and ride and not having the hassle, that's a good option. And so they were pretty resourceful in trying to figure out the next step for this shuttle. And again, it's covered solely by the county. We're working on these problems. We hear people in El Dorado Springs and in the Valley and issues around this, and we get it, and we're trying to address the issue. And if you have suggestions for us, let us know. We can always make these things better.
Thank you, Commissioner. Jeff Moline had to leave. Actually, he's doing triple duty and going to another meeting in Lafayette. So Randy and Bevan are going to stay for the rest of the meeting and answer any additional questions. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to go back to a question sent in. Pua asks, what plans does Parks and Open Space have for handling and/or improving weed control and invasive species in Boulder County parks and open space?
So I would love to answer this question. Anybody that knows me well knows that weeds drive me crazy, the invasive weeds, because they are really damaging the land, the ecosystem, and many of them are very wily and crafty about finding ways to outcompete native species, native grasses, and some of them are toxic to the birds and to foraging animals. And so it's really, really important that we manage those. And the county is working really hard on it. I know, I go places and I really despair at the thistle, at the cheatgrass, at the bindweed, at the Dame's rocket, which I'm now seeing everywhere. But please know that we do have a crew that is dedicated to weed control. We have to adhere by the state's noxious weed laws, and we do utilize an integrated pest management plan so that we try to do mechanical pulling where that's possible, but not all weeds are susceptible to that. Sometimes you can broadcast them more if you don't pull them successfully. So we're always testing new treatments for different kinds of weeds that are spread in different ways. And we've recently been testing some new treatments for cheatgrass control and have seen good success with that on our grasslands. One thing about cheatgrass that is especially harmful is that you'll notice it green up very early in the spring, and it looks very nice and kind of willowy and gentle, but then it dies in June often and becomes an extreme fire hazard. And so they're really blaming cheatgrass on speeding up, making the fire season earlier throughout the West, and you'll see it everywhere. I was on top of Coffin Top, which is another place I don't want anyone to know about. But I was just amazed to see cheatgrass way up on top of that mountain. You think, how in the world did it get here? And but animals carry it up in their fur, and so it's definitely a problem. We're working hard on it. I know that some places have weed spotters where you can mark that. Maybe Bevan can tell us whether we have that in Boulder County or not, because I know that there are a lot of really dedicated lay people who would love to participate in helping us get a handle on our weeds.
Yeah, I would just add that, like you, Commissioner Levy, we have some volunteers and some ranger staff that have a real connection with weed control, and that they're really working hard, especially places like Hall Ranch and Isle Ranch, and that the cheatgrass control, just from what I've seen, and I'm not an invasive species specialist at all, but there's amazing things happening in parks and open space with regards to cheatgrass and flowers and shrubs that we haven't seen in years are popping up in areas where that's been controlled. So fingers crossed that's working real well.
And there's one thing you can do, and it's a leave no trace technique, and that is clean your shoes or your tires if they're muddy, or look for seeds on them. That's one way these seeds are transported. And you can do your part by doing that, especially if you're going from place to place. If you go the same place over and over, it's not such a big deal. But if you're down where there's a lot of weeds and you go up into a remote area, you're probably carrying a seed with you.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Good information for everybody. I have a question from Mike. He asks, I've been told no access to a property without a management plan, and no new amenities to properties with a plan without a management plan revisit. BCPOS is stuck. How will the BOCC help unstick them?
I'm happy to try and address this question without our county open space folks with us still this evening, but and I'm almost positive that Mike and I have had this conversation in the past, and now I have a really different perspective on the question itself. But there's a couple different pieces, and so to try and understand where some of the question tonight is, or I guess it came through in an email, but some of it's around just the trails at existing properties or new trails at a new property. And interestingly enough, according to the manager of our planning division in Boulder County Parks and Open Space, there's several things that are happening right now that we're working on and that staff is working on as far as new projects to open new trails that have gone through those same processes. And that's the other piece that I hear or I'm reading, maybe interpreting in the question about just the process of what it takes to get to the point of being able to do management plan and to consider it and to do the design and to do feasibility studies and all those different pieces that are part of all the processes. But a few of those projects that were shared with us to open new trails include the 104th Street Trail in the southern part of the county. The department is pursuing planning efforts associated with the strategic priorities that the Board of County Commissioners has. It's a 2018 to 2023 plan. And part of that's implementation of the CRISP that we already talked about for that particular plan. That's also going to have pieces around how we create access and the planning process itself, the other strategic plan projects and partnering, as we've talked about a little bit on and off here, about the partnering with different municipalities and different jurisdictions, different agencies to plan for local connections to regional trail facilities. One of the other ones that was mentioned to us is Toll Trail, that is about to break ground, that has gone through a lengthy process as well. And another is the Regional Trail Program, working on the RTD rail trail as well as future alignments for the St. Greenway. So those were a couple of pieces that were shared with us just as what else is happening. And then I think, again, kind of interpreting it into the question is the length of time that it takes to process. And what I will say is that there's a lot of different pieces happening right now in the county. We are still in the midst of a global pandemic. We are still trying to get our commissioners' offices under construction to add to 16 months of not being in working space. There's all these different dynamics that are helping and happening, as well as us looking as commissioners at the internal processes, looking at efficiencies, inefficiencies, looking at our planning. And I think everybody knows around the state of Colorado and even nationally that we have an issue that we just barely touched on here of labor shortage, of employment, of the same that we're focusing tonight really on open space and rangers and search and rescue, but it's everywhere. And we're all experiencing that from a service level. And it's no different for our public works team, who's down right now, about 15 people. We've got different departments that are suffering that. And our community planning and permitting department is suffering from the same thing. So it is on our mind, and we're looking, I can say that's something that I'm focusing on now is on that internal piece, which I think is also part of that question, intentionally or unintentionally. So that's my response, but certainly if anyone else wanted to add anything into that, that's great.
Yeah, I did. Thank you for the question, and because I think there's another question embedded in here, which is more trails and more access. And we're talking tonight about trail overcrowding, and you would think that the answer to that might be, well, let's just build more trails and create more access. But we purchased this land and manage this land for a number of different uses, and one of them is habitat preservation, and so it's not just here for recreation, as wonderful as it is to be able to get out into our open space. And the more trails we create, the more we fragment habitat, and the more stress we put on animals that need our open space to survive. So and this is the point of the management plans, and that's the point of the really extensive period of study that goes on to understand the habitat needs. What are the elk migration routes, and what kinds of squirrels or birds, are nesting in different locations. And it takes some time to do that inventory and understand how the land is used. So Even though we would all like more places to go, it's just not good for the land. So, you know, that's another piece I think that's embedded within Mike's question.
Yeah, and to add to that, as somebody who did environmental and recreation planning at the city of Boulder, you need to think these things through and do the trade-offs right up front. And you need to figure out the best place to put the trail for a good visitor experience and for resource protection. It's a real balancing act. And you can go up to Caribou in Mud Lake. You can see how good a job they did balancing that. It is a great visitor experience. We were just up there the other day. Everybody knows about it. You can know about it. I'm not like Claire. I let everybody know where I go. But it is a great visitor experience out there. We saw a bear. They just reopened it because they closed it for several months for elk calving. And that's the planning. That's the part of it. And I don't think the bear's used to humans being up there because it opened up July 1. and it's like, what the heck? There are people here. But that is a good example. And so there's no dogs at Caribou, but there are dogs at Mud Lake. And it's a great place to go walk your dog. We walk our grand dogs there on occasion. So anyway, that's why you want to do this stuff up front.
Thank you, commissioners. The next question is from Cindy. She asks if Boulder County could use LotSpot to provide trail users with information on parking availability.
Yeah, I can take that one, Jennifer.
Thank you.
We have certainly been spying on our neighbors to the south in Jefferson County and watching very closely at how they're managing some of their parking issues. And as we all know, they have a much higher use. They're much closer to those major metropolitan areas around Denver. So they've worked a little. This issue with trailhead overcrowding has come faster to them. So we're really watching what they're doing. We've had our initial meetings with the folks at LotSpot to talk about what that might look like in Boulder County. Right now, we're taking a little pause to make sure that that is the right fit. And before we move to implementing LotSpot, we wanted to make sure that there was more of a regional approach. So instead of just having 1 or 2 counties, we wanted to see if there was interest with some of our municipalities, maybe the Forest Service, the city of Boulder, if they'd be interested in using LotSpot as well, so that no matter where you go along the Front Range, you can get on LotSpot and look and see if there's parking available. So that's where we're at right now. Those are just very initial conversations about whether this is the right approach for Boulder County. But in the meantime, we've snuck in a few features on our website that I don't think a lot of folks are familiar with. If you go to any one of our web pages, and I think Walker Ranch is a really great one, we provide a lot of information about the visitor experience. And if we scroll down just a little bit, there's an area where we've added visitation. So there we go. So you'll see where we've added our visitation numbers: average daily visitation, visitation by the hour. So just like Commissioner Levy said, there's certain hours when you can visit our parks where you'll have an experience all to yourself. And we've put that on there. So you can look for each one of our parks and see what the visitation is by month and then by hour, and then overall at the different trailheads. So if you're at Walker Ranch, instead of going to the Loop, you may want to choose and go out to Myers Homestead for a different experience. The other exciting thing that we've done in our parks is we've snuck some cameras into our parking lots. Right now we have live images that you can view at Walker Ranch. So you can see here, this was from earlier today. We didn't have a lot of visitation. It would have been a great day to visit Walker Ranch. And then we've put those right now at Walker Ranch, and we have another camera at Colton. And then thanks to the Boulder County Parks and Open Space Foundation, we'll be adding 3 more parking lot cameras, starting with Pella Crossing, really in the coming weeks. So I think this is a feature that we have on our website that a lot of folks don't know about. The rangers use it to see where we should patrol. We use it to see what the weather is, all those kind of things. So it's really great. And in addition to something like LotSpot, I think this could help a lot of visitors choose when they visit the parks and choose those times that are a little less busy.
And also be aware that you're being watched.
there is a little bit of that. And it's great because when we know the parks are real busy, you'll see an extra ranger presence there as well. So it really helps us plan our day, especially when we're limited on staff. We can take a look at those cameras and see where we need to be. And the sheriff's office is utilizing them as well. So it's keeping our visitors safe and allowing them just to have a great experience depending on when they want to visit.
Thanks for sharing that, Bevan. You're right. That was new news for me. And, I just drove over to Grand Junction over the holiday weekend, and I use those cameras going over I-70 whenever I travel that way. Last week, of course, our state was dealing with mudslides, but I see the benefits of having those cameras in our open space areas for what you talked about, weather related, and also, unfortunately, to know when we have our next dangerous wildfire. So in all seriousness, there's some real benefits to having that information as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bevan. We have another question that came in from Wendy. This one's kind of interesting. Can you please elaborate on the difference between car reservations and visitor reservations?
I don't think I can.
I think just in the most basic level, I think what we're seeing from a lot of land managers right now, like Rocky, what I've been discussing a little bit are car reservations. So you'd get online, and for your vehicle, you'd enter your license plate, and that would reserve a parking spot for you for a day or a half a day. There may be a fee, may not be a fee associated with that. When we think about the shuttle, we know that we have a limited number of seats. So that might be a person reservation. But I think what we're really looking at as we talk about reservation systems are the car reservations, so that families can make one reservation. They can all come and have a place to park their car. So really, when we talk about reservations, I think we're talking a lot about vehicle reservations.
Okay, thank you, Bevan. We have some questions about rescues. And basically, David is asking, is there any root cause analysis of the need for rescues, like getting off the trail, inexperience, age, didn't bring water? And are there any lessons learned that enable us to take steps that may reduce the need to have a number of rescues in the future?
So yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I'll take that out of my realm. The answer to that question is yes, all the above, right? We see a smattering of everything. We see people not taking water with them. We see people going off trails. That's probably where we see in the open space areas, specifically where people are getting hurt, is typically when they're going off trail, they're not on the trail. And then for me, in my purview and where I'm at, rescues also include the stuff up in the National Forest Service lands and high altitude stuff. And so we've hit on it a couple times. I'll hit it on it again. There's another question in here that we might get to get a chance. There's a lot of stakeholders when it comes to some of these areas. One of them is the National Forest Service. And so, yeah, on the trailheads down low in the open space areas, except for maybe like Hesse, that trailhead's a little up there. What we're seeing is sprained ankles and getting off trail. The other thing we do see, like on Chautauqua Park, which is actually a city open space, but we do rescues for that area as well. There are those people that go up there, like I said, in the afternoon, thinking they're going to climb to the top and then come back down. And they get to the top, and then the weather rolls in, or the sun goes down, and they didn't bring their equipment. They didn't have a flashlight or water or helmet or rain gear or those kinds of things. So some of that is people getting familiar with those areas and understanding that, if you're at 10,000 feet of elevation, the weather can roll in on you fast, and you need to have your equipment with you when that happens. And so some of that is going to be learning. People just have to learn and be educated on that. We do some of those education pieces of it. One of the other things that we have also learned is, like I said before, these are getting a lot more remote on us. And so the vehicles and roads to get to some of these places don't exist. And so we're transitioning over to using UTVs and some of the other smaller vehicles that we get back into some of these more remote areas and have access. So those are the two things we see. You hit it right on the head. Those are the typical causes of rescues. And then the next one is just an accident. Someone just falls. Someone comes from a low altitude to Colorado, immediately gets on one of these high elevation trails and starts having problems because of altitude sickness and stuff like that. So there's some things we can do, and a lot of it is just learning and education.
I'm going to just add on to that. Thanks, Commander. Commissioner Jones and I have been attending, he longer than I, but a group called NoCo Places 2050. And that's been a lot of the conversation this year is about the questions that David brought up and how do we educate folks? So we know that we're this tourist location and people jump off the plane and at DIA and are sure they're going to make it up the Flatiron because they saw it in a magazine or they saw it online in someone's video. And so that's been part of the conversation. And I would really welcome, I know all the commissioners would really welcome ideas and solutions and thoughts that maybe y'all have seen in other places around the country. One of those, just from a, how do we help people just be educated and get a little bit of that training? Someone's question elsewhere in the chat was about ATVs, some of these new technologies, some of this, all the different ways that we use and are moving our open space or visitorship out in different places. And so that education piece that the commander just finished with is also something that we're talking about collectively, collaboratively, so that we can offer some of those. And I think that's going to continue to develop this season, but certainly in the future. So just want to welcome community members who might have experience in some of those areas that would want to help and support with some great ideas of how to educate folks so that we can lessen our search and rescue.
Jennifer, I have a real funny anecdote. Just from a few days ago, I was at a store in Lafayette buying sunscreen or something for the ranger staff. And there was 4 young men that saw me and said, "Oh, are you a park ranger?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I had my uniform on. And they said, "Well, we just drove here from Ohio. We have a quick vacation and we have a permit for the Indian Peaks. Can you show us what camping gear to buy?" And that just shows you the level of visitors that we have to all of our parks. And of course, I took the time to actually help them pick out their camping gear, and they got a little lecture from Ranger Bevan about being prepared and what to expect up there in the Indian Peaks. But it really does come to that amount of education for those that are visiting for the first time, all the way up to some of our professional athletes that just have accidents that we need to assist as well. So it is a huge spectrum.
Thank you.
Okay, actually, you did mention ATVs, Commissioner Loachman, and we did receive 2 questions. These residents did send in names of places or companies, so I'm not going to mention them. However, the concerns are that there are private ATV companies coming out of neighboring towns and counties, maybe one even in our county, collecting large sums of money from customers and sending them with their ATVs out to destroy and overuse Boulder County roads. Is there anything the commissioners can do for our parks and open space or enforcement folks? Is there anything that can be done to address the dangers and damage of ATVs on our county roads?
So if everyone doesn't mind, I'll jump in on this one just real quick, and then someone else can chime in if they want to. So that those issues are typically not on open space because ATVs aren't allowed on open space. Where we're seeing that issue is up on the National Forest Service lands. And so that's where some of that's going. One of the things is obviously National Forest Service is a stakeholder. They have their own management plan, their own management team, and their own management strategies for their lands. But again, like Bevan alluded to, one of the things that we've done over the last few years is really try to build strong relationships with the Forest Service to try to help address some of these issues. And don't want to get too far down in the weeds on this, but one of the issues we run into is where we have county roads or county land interfacing with Forest Service and the rules and regulations being different on both sets of lands. And what is allowed on one isn't necessarily allowed on the other, and vice versa. So to kind of address some of that, one of the things we do as enforcement is we get a hold of CPW or Forest Service. They have one law enforcement officer assigned for all of Boulder County, Gilpin County, all the way up into Wyoming. So getting their enforcement officer down here sometimes is difficult, and try to hit some of these areas. And then for some of the other things, there's environmental issues and that kind of stuff. We then reach out to some of the other county entities such as land use and permitting and those kinds of things to try to get those people involved and up to speed and to help tackle some of those problems. So those are some of the things we're doing to try to address some of that. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Commander. Okay, we've gotten a lot of questions in and covered a lot of ground, my pun again. We'd like to move to polls, and let's see if I can do them correctly this month. Our first poll is going to be in English, and I would like to know from our English-speaking attendees when it's safe to attend future town hall meetings in person. Would you like to do so or stick with virtual meetings? Okay, we've got voting coming in.
Do we need to provide instructions on how to vote?
People seem to be voting,
okay.
but I could make sure that everyone does know that the voting happens through the polls on the bottom of your screen, only in Zoom. You cannot vote through YouTube if you're just watching, so apologies for that. Okay, it looks like 71% of you want virtual meetings and 29% of you would like in-person meetings. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. Okay, going on to the next poll. This is for our Spanish speakers. Same question.
Cuando sea seguro asistir en persona a las futuras asambleas públicas, ¿le gustaría hacerlo o continuar con las reuniones virtuales durante este año?
Gracias, Commissioner Lochaman. Okay. Numbers coming in. Okay. Looks like 78% want to continue with virtual meetings and 22% would like to meet in person. So thank you everyone for that. I'm going to move real quickly to my next poll question because we're running short on time and I want to make sure we can collect our thoughts, and let's move on to the next one. Okay, next question, again for our English speakers. If the board brings in content experts to present at future meetings, which topics interest you in 2021? And you can choose as many as you like. Okay, right out of the gate, affordable housing, homelessness, racial equity, okay. This is great. It's good to hear from everybody, and we've got a lot of good content to talk about in the future. This is good to hear. Give it just another second or two. Okay. Okay, it sounds like climate issues are number one. 74% of our English-speaking attendees would like to discuss climate issues, followed by affordable housing, and then followed by open space, trail and acquisition properties, land use issues. Maybe I'm not scrolling all the way down. Okay. We'll capture this as well and make sure that we keep that in mind as we plan future content. And now let's do our next poll in Spanish.
Para
For our
nuestros
Spanish speakers.
participantes en español, la pregunta es si la Junta trae expertos en contenidos para hacer presentaciones en futuras asambleas, ¿qué temas le interesan en 2021? Y pueden escoger más que solo una opción, pueden escoger los que quieran.
Okay. All right, we'll end the polling. Okay, vivienda asequible, 50% would like to hear about that. And equidad racial equity are the top two. Oh, and then also necesidades de la comunidad. So I can't say that. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Gracias. It's so great to have everyone's feedback on this information. So muchas gracias. Okay. We're getting towards the end of our time here. And so I just want to tell everyone, if you sent in questions and did not get them answered this evening, I will certainly try to circle back and get you answers, or please join us next time as well. Just want to see if there's any closing thoughts from our subject matter experts. What would you like to let people know in closing?
So I'll start. Obviously, if you're coming out to go hiking and biking and enjoying the open space areas, make sure you're prepared. Make sure you have water. Make sure you have some gear and watch the weather. And I almost still Bevan's thunder just a little bit too, and use some of those tools that were presented tonight to try to figure out some of those slow times. So when you do go to an area, you're likely to get a parking space. And then please, 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 please be cognizant and appreciative of the neighbors of those open space areas. You only park where you're supposed to be parking. That's my
Yeah, I think Randy said that well. Just know before you go, be prepared for your adventure in Boulder County. And yeah, please, please, please just park in those designated spots. That leaves us a lot more time to assist you and help you on the trails.
Thank you both. Commissioners, do you have any closing comments before I show the slide of how to contact us in future?
I'll jump in. This has been great. Thank you so much, Bevan, Randy, and Jeff, who had to leave. I think it's very informative. I think a lot of people heard about a lot more people, but didn't understand kind of what it meant to the county. And I think you guys did a great job of filling that in and getting people a better view of that. And I'm just appreciative of all the county staff work to make it happen over the last year and a half. It was tough. I mean, down to cleaning the toilets and doing a great job of it. So I just want to give my thanks to all of you and the sheriff's officers and deputies that had to do all the work on overtime. So thank you.
And I'll just also join Commissioner Jones, and I'm sure Commissioner Lochamin, in thanking Randy Wilbur and Bevan Carruthers for spending part of their evening with us. I think the interest that we had in this town hall just is indicative of how much people love our open space, and that's a good thing. And we appreciate the support that the taxpayers continue to provide to that program. It really makes Boulder County special, and it is, it's a magnet. It's beautiful. It shows up well on Instagram, unfortunately. And so more people are going to continue to come, and we're just lucky really that it is in our backyard, and we need to take care of it. But I think what the parting message I would have, and I know I don't need that to say that to the people on this in this town hall, because I see who you are and I know who you are and I know that you know all of these things, but to say more broadly, look at our entire system that is up on the open space website. There are lots and lots and lots of places to go. And we don't all have to go to the trails that come out of Hesse or come out of El Dorado Springs or up at the 4th of July campground. There are lots of places to go. I'm not going to tell you where I like to go, but please, and you know, because you'll discover some new wonderful places that nobody else knows about.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I will just quickly add in, we're at our time. I just want to say thanks to staff for supporting this event. It's a really important topic, and I agree with the other commissioners that we've got folks who are really interested and need to know, and that know your go, where, you know before you go is not just about inconvenience at parking. It's also about safety. It's about sharing that message with folks that are telling you they want to stop by and visit you in Colorado this summer. Prep them, help them. Those are conversations we need to be talking about with our neighbors and folks who are talking about Colorado, even online. So I just thank you. I want to thank you, send a thank you to our interpreters who are here doing simultaneous interpretation for our Boulder County residents, and also to Jeff, who had to jump off. Thank you to him, to Bhavin, and to Randy for spending the evening with us, and to our community members. We are so glad that you're participating in these virtual town halls. It's really, really important for us to be out, to be present, accessible, and there were a lot more questions that came through, and so we are pulling those together, and if you had a name and contact, then we can respond. Thank you all.
Okay, Natalie, if we can show the final slide with contact information. We will be taking a break from town halls in August, but we'll get together again Thursday, September 9th, same time, I imagine. Please stay tuned for that announcement via BOCC Summa, email, Facebook, and Nextdoor. For news and updates from the county, please subscribe at www.bouldercounty.org. And if you have any questions or concerns, please email us at commissioners@bouldercounty.org. We'll be happy to